Hello again, it's Devin Price, and I'm here with another video version of one of my Substack essays. It's my most recent one called Maybe You'll Never Be Happy, But You Can Be Interested. And it's an advice column, I guess arguably an autistic advice column, though it's more general than that. It's really philosophical, self-help, maybe in the original kind of philosophical sense of the term. It is a response to a reader question about what to do if in your unmasking journey, in your unlearning shame journey, in your personal work on yourself, you just keep uncovering layers and layers of unhappiness, no matter how much work you do try to do to free yourself. And it was a question that I got that really resonated with me, and it also is related to a few things that have come up in comments on other essays before. I sometimes allude to in my writing this idea that I'm not a happy person. I don't think I ever will be. I can experience happiness and joy and enjoyment of things, but it's difficult. It's not a huge part of how I'm wired, and that's maybe okay. That's maybe not the central source of life meaning for all of us. And I think arguably we have an expectation in Western culture, particularly white Western culture, that in life you're going to be happy. That one of the goals in life is for you to be as happy as you can be. And that sets up a false expectation for how life is going to actually work out for a lot of us, and really just how human beings process things. Happiness just really isn't sustainable. It's a emotional signal like all other emotional signals. And so when our body or our situation needs to tip us off to something else, we feel other emotions. We can't hold on to that happiness. We're going to get hungry and jealous and insecure and depressed and all manner of other things, and those emotions are important. So as usual, I'm going to be reading the piece to you, describing the visuals in the piece, and talking through any links that are also relevant to the piece for those of you who can't read it on screen, or just prefer to get your content, as it were, in this video format. So without further ado, I will fire up the screen share. Loki, my cat, is bumbling around on the desk, so hopefully she chooses to not be too much of a bother right now. So here is the piece on drdevinprice.substack.com, which you can head right on over and read yourself and access the links and everything for free if you like. Maybe you'll never be happy, but you can be interested. Finding meaning in an ordinarily unhappy life. The cover image for this piece is a Tumblr quote from Mark Maron that I posted on my Tumblr in like 2012 when I was still listening to his podcast, What the Fuck, a lot more frequently. I've just always really loved Mark Maron as this sensitive yet very explosive, neurotic guy. He's this masculinity that has bombast, but also has kind of this feminine sensitivity to it, as he himself often describes it. And the quote is, "People often ask me, what makes you feel joy? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What could that possibly mean?" I just love that quote. Welcome back to Autistic Advice, a semi-regular advice column where I respond to reader questions about neurodiversity, accessibility, disability justice, and self-advocacy from my perspective as an autistic psychologist. You can submit questions or suggest future entries in my series via my Tumblr Ask box. That's at drdevinprice.com/ask, or now you can also email your questions to askdevinprice@gmail. And I added that because you need to have a Tumblr account, I think, even to send an anonymous question. So there you go, one other way to get in potentially. Today's questions come from neurodivergent people who, despite working hard at accepting themselves and unmasking, still find that they are riddled with shame and are unable to imagine a future in which they are happy. Here's our first anonymous question from Tumblr. Anonymous asked, "Any tips for what to do when unpacking shame seems to just keep bringing up new layers? I have a tendency to ruminate and a talent for inventing new reasons to feel bad." Anon, it does not surprise me to hear that there are layers upon layers of shame stacked all atop one another in your mind, like the uncountable coats of sticky white paint a landlord coats his units with instead of ever cleaning them. It gets confining, doesn't it? Being expected to do everything while being denied so much. When you think on all of the societal rules that guide your life and the punishments you faced that taught you what those rules were, doesn't it get difficult to move around freely, to place your things where you'd like them, hell, even to breathe? Shrugging off society's shoulds and reclaiming a better, more empowering life for yourself often works this way. The outermost layer of shame that we begin to work on are the ones that most obviously wound us and most visibly impede our lives. But beneath those overt levels of shame, there are lifetimes of trauma and societal messaging lurking underneath. Working on shame in its most obvious forms can sometimes reveal to us our deeply ingrained issues. For example, a lot of people are very aware that they feel ashamed about their bodies. It's no secret we live in a society that abhors fat people and would rather see them die of medical neglect than accept that human beings have all manner of bodies. If you feel ashamed about your body, you might be reminded of it every time you go clothes shopping, shower, get dressed, prepare a meal, step on the scale at the doctor's office, or try to send a sexy nude to a stranger. It's not uncommon for people to speak openly about loathing their bodies, and alongside the exploitations of the diet industry, a whole parallel industry selling tepid body positivity is there to offer workbooks, therapies, and flirty, controlled top panty sets to you. So if you're ashamed about your body, you probably know it, and you have some framework for understanding where that shame comes from and why you might want to see it gone. The same thing is true for other overt prejudices people face in society. If you are affected by anti-blackness, transphobia, ableism, classism, and the like, you probably know, to some extent, that you do. You see how it affects you and your communities all the time, and you probably want to overcome that shame so that you can claim more of your power back. But what happens after you start making real progress in vanquishing that shame? Let's say you have surrounded yourself with fat liberationist buddies, read books by Aubrey Gordon and Deshaun Harrison, attended a Lindy West-esque fat girl pool party, tried eating intuitively, and started grounding yourself using self-pleasure and yoga. You might find that the constantly running monologue inside your brain is not so fixated on your body size anymore, or the tenor of the internal conversation has changed. Maybe now you do not hate your body, but you hate that you wasted so many years not fully living. You might no longer hate how you look, but you might still feel ashamed to eat in public. And if you are fat, you are still getting stared at and judged when you do. Your self-loathing and rumination may have entirely flipped the script on you, even, and now it shames you for every single fat-phobic thought you ever have, because it makes you a bad fat liberationist and not a true friend to everyone in the movement, a failure at working on yourself and at achieving the American dream of boundless, untroubled personal happiness. And so while your life has objectively gotten freer and more connected, you don't really feel any better than before. It is pretty typical for a person living in a puritanical, morally restrictive society to keep stewing in self-hatred long after they have decided that society made them that way for unjust reasons. Inside of your mind, there are core beliefs about how the world works and values that indicate how you think the world should work, yes, but you also have emotional and psychological patterns that function somewhat independently of them. So sometimes you shift away from old beliefs and bad values that didn't serve you, but find that the feeling and thought patterns that kept them going are still there. So let's say that you used to hate your body because you believed that fatness was undesirable and a sign of laziness and failure. You've read up on the obesity paradox and set point theory and looked at a ton of porn featuring fat cuties, and now you don't believe any of that stuff anymore. Your mind dropped those old beliefs and values. But your mind is also still engaging in the process of judging your desirability and evaluating your worthiness based on how hard you try and how much you measure up to some external moral standard. And so you're miserable because you still don't feel you are being a good enough person or following the rules. You feel anxious because you've oriented your whole life around meeting external standards. But now you might not even be sure of what the rules are anymore. You've thrown out the values that mainstream fatphobic society gave you. So what should you value now? Is it kindness, generosity, self-sacrifice, political radicalism, self-love? Your mind is still so well trained in self-denial and puritanism that it can make almost any belief into a reason to punish yourself. You believe in fat liberation? Well, you aren't doing enough to uplift people who are more affected by fat phobia than you. You believe that everyone should have access to food and medical care without gatekeeping based on income and body size? Well, people are starving and dying on the street, yet here you are sitting at home eating a yogurt parfait. How disgusting of you. It is easier to change a belief or a personal value than it is to change the entire architecture of your mind. And that really sucks because changing beliefs and values is already hard. It takes a person years to decondition themselves out of an irrationally hateful belief system. Even after those beliefs are gone, the mental instinct to hate and judge can still be there. You may free yourself from certain damaging social rules along the way, but your brain is still searching for the laws to follow in order to be a good person. Like every lifelong eating disorder sufferer, I am quite good at inventing rules for myself to follow, and then crushing all gasps of selfhood beneath them. When I was a teenager on the pro-anorexia LiveJournal community, my rules were concerned with calories. But after I started trying to get a little bit better, the rules were about how much time I spent in physical activity. After I got invested in fighting fat phobia, that's what it should say there, my rules had to do with getting enough nutrition and looking healthy in other people's eyes. But still I had this need for rules, to create a structure that could contain my life and set specific guidelines by which I could judge my success and failure. Socially, I was getting abstract signs of failure all the time. I was too autistic and weird and disinterested in most other people to ever feel an easy, comfortable success in the world. But my rules gave me hope because they said I was failing repeatedly for a specific reason, and that I could one day be successful, virtuous, and beloved if I only got my behavior perfectly in line. I kept making up new rules about everything, then feeling ashamed of myself for failing to follow them. I had daily word count goals, socializing goals, activism goals, reading goals, financial goals, rules about how I was supposed to carry my body, dress, speak, think, feel, meditate, masturbate, clean, and enjoy my downtime. My rules set the standard for what it meant to be a good person, but I never felt like one. One way to get over that shame, potentially, is to banish all aspirations of being a good person and simply allow oneself to be. What does it actually mean to be a good person? I know I don't believe what the law or Christianity have to say about it. I wouldn't trust any institutionalized religion to tell me how to live. The professional organizations to which I belong have signed off on some seriously unethical, immoral stuff. I can't really judge my conduct based on how other people view it. A lot of people have absolutely horrific worldviews. I don't fully agree with any of my friends about how life should be lived. They make lots of decisions I never would. I don't think there's a God. I don't think nature cares what I do. So who decides if I am a good person? And how would I even know if they did? I'm not getting a medal for it. I'm not going to heaven. All I have is this life as I am experiencing it right now. Nobody is in charge of it. It is not being graded. The majority of my life will be witnessed and evaluated by no one but me. Am I going to carry out my entire existence looking over my shoulder at the imagined psychologies of others, feeling terrible every single time my actions don't line up with what literally anyone on the planet might consider ideal? Or can I simply accept that I am an animal that hungers, gets horny, gets triggered and feels threatened, that sometimes wants to hurt others, and sometimes can be selfish, but is mostly just acting out of my impulses and prior training, and that none of it necessarily means anything? I find a kind of refuge in this naturalistic nihilism, Anon. Maybe it will work for you, maybe it won't. But when I look at my chinchilla or the birds outside, I know that they are not wondering what they should be doing. They are just doing all manner of things. They have reactions that can be violent or cruel. They can be loving caretakers, playful goobers, snarling amoral killers, all in the same breath. They are living wild accumulations of external pressure, reaction, and experience. And what do you know? I am too. Beneath each layer of self-imposed rules that I peel off, Anon, I find an older, more primordial coat of paint that tells me something about how the animal of me was treated long ago. I need to be thin became I need to be fit, became I need to be hardworking, became I need to be attractive, became I need to convince people to take care of me. I understand where that shame really came from, in the end. It was from being young and vulnerable and not having anyone who was able to protect me. The upshot of finding so many layers of shame hiding inside of you, Anon, is that you are developing greater self-awareness. You used to think you were ashamed of just your transness, let's say, or of your inability to work a full-time job. But beneath that outermost layer of shame, you are finding the buried, older rules that guide you and the shame that informed them. You can tackle those layers of shame one by one, and though it is a lifelong, ugly process, it does bring you greater clarity and freedom at each stage. I'm still a completely self-loathing wreck, but now at least I know it is because I fear being a complete void, with no one around that loves me and nothing to live for. That's an existential, philosophical ache I can use to connect with other people, and maybe make some decent art out of. Grappling with the hatred of the void beats hating and starving myself. It is better to know what's going on inside of you, even if a lot of it isn't pleasant. But also, hear me out, Anon. What if you expect that some of the time, maybe even a lot of the time, you are going to feel bad? That might be an anxious, shame-ridden, ruminative person whose brain casts about for reasons to feel inadequate no matter what you do. Could you make peace with that? Could you have a life that is worthwhile even if the shame never goes away? If you've been prone to rumination going as far back as you can remember, it's reasonable to expect that to remain for the rest of your days. That needn't be the end of the world or an especially big deal. You've lived a whole complex life already while carrying this spiraling monkey on your back, through times good and bad, and you can continue to carry it through times that are joyful and tragic and chaotic and most of all, interesting. As human beings, we evolved not to be happy, but to survive. There is a utility to our anxiety and ruminative thinking. Our active minds do solve problems by thinking very hard about them, and we do avoid misfortune by gaming out future worst-case scenarios. Of course, worrying and overthinking can get us into awful trouble just as much as it protects us, but it is an inarguable part of having a consciousness, all the same. It may not be enjoyable, but neither is that straining need-to-pee feeling that sends us running to the restroom. Responding to discomfort keeps us alive. A lot of shame spiraling happens because our brains are trying to protect us from future social rejection, looking out for missed signals, second-guessing assumptions, and imagining potential faux pas. And when we are marginalized, we actually are getting rejected just about every single day. So it's quite natural for us to dread interacting with people and wondering constantly if something we are doing is wrong. We have our reasons to worry. Here is a link to a piece I've written called "The Biological Causes of Mental Illness Cannot Be Separated from the Social Ones." Case in point, rejection sensitive dysphoria in kids with ADHD or autism. And what this piece argues is that rejection sensitive dysphoria, as it's labeled by clinicians, is not irrational. It's not oversensitivity. It is people who have been excluded and disposed of over and over again, knowing that and expecting that to happen in the future, and knowing that that makes their life really dangerous. And so, of course, they're freaking the fuck out. And the problem isn't, therefore, their anxiety, but the circumstances that have made them rationally that anxious. So similar argumentation being made in that piece as here. Your shame, Anon, is not your fault. It's not the sign of an insufficiently ascended worldview. It's not from a lack of dedicated inner work. It's not a moral failure. And it's not a defect you can easily fix. Being riddled with shame and fixating on the negative is just a thing that happens in your life. It happens to you. It happens to me. It happens to just about every marginalized person. But you can continue having a full life. You can try new things, meet new people, question your beliefs, adopt new ones, develop a new spiritual practice, break your old rules, get obsessed with new ones, disappoint people, impress others, fuck up, learn, forget, let go, and continue. Your life can be a Monster of the Week TV show in which the status quo resets at the end of each plotline and you have to learn the same lessons again and again. You can commit yourself to doing acts of pure altruism in your community while being absolutely vile and petty to your ex. In short, you can be a complex and conflicted animal, one that never stops having triggers or showing the signs of past neglect. We don't expect our rescue animals to ever become blank slates free of trauma, do we? We still love them, even if they're afraid of men in tall hats and hoard their food and poop on the carpet forever. You can be full of shame and neuroses and still be loved. And loved yourself. Some of the time. On a good day. When you're not freaking the fuck out about one of your imaginary rules being violated. And you might just be adorable and relatable to huge segments of society, even when you are wrapped up in these irrational meltdowns. In the midst of the storm, you may learn how to look up and admire the greenness of the sky, or analyze the twitching of your pulse in your arm. You can learn something and take a keen interest in yourself and others, always. Even when you are beside yourself with self-loathing and misery. Your shame and rumination, Anon, are not your fault. They're just something you have to find your own way to live alongside. And though they are a burden that you carry, you needn't carry them alone. Our second question this week comes from an unmasking autistic who is having trouble figuring out what they want out of life and what could make them happy. Anonymous asked, I've been reading your new book, that's Unmasking for Life, and there's one thing that I keep tripping over. Coming up with things I want. I was never good at that, but the last 8 years of chronic autism burnout/depression have atrophied even that. So how do you do that? Come up with things you want when you're always drawing blanks. Wanting things and feeling pleasure don't come easily to all of us, Anon. We can blame this anhedonic tendency on many factors. And for those who don't know, anhedonia is the inability to experience positive emotions, often a characteristic of depression. First is the autistic bent towards alexithymia. Many of us are quite poor at identifying our feelings, due to neurological differences in how we process stimuli and body states. Because we have been repeatedly conditioned to ignore our discomfort and be quiet about our interests, or some combination of both those things. And that's a link to a piece by me that talks about how alexithymia is probably not purely neurological, that there is an element of trauma that makes a person detach from their body. Autistic people famously dissociate from reality a lot because the world can be so unpleasant and unwelcoming to us. Most of us have been abused multiple times, and we lack power in society, so we haven't been able to go after the things that we want. Sometimes we cope by ceasing to have those troublesome wants at all. Wanting and enjoying things is a skill that can atrophy, and sadly, we may have been protected from it having atrophied. Not caring and not wanting can preserve a lot of energy and protect us from pointless fights. But eventually, many of us become settled and safe enough that we do want things to go after. Our reflex to quiet every reaction and imitate those around us hits its breaking point, and we know that pretending to be a non-person will kill us. But by then, it's hard to get our wants back, or to be present enough in reality to enjoy them. And then, there are just some people who do not feel positive emotions very strongly. Try as they might to recapture childlike joy, unwind, and free themselves from repression, they find that they just never can, and that expecting themselves to be happy only sets them up for greater frustration. It must be said, deeply individualistic and American expectation of great happiness becomes yet another neurotypical quality that they lack, another way in which they fail to measure up. But life can be so much more than happiness or getting what you want. And truth be told, most people eventually come to realize that moods like happiness are fleeting, that getting what you desire offers only a short respite before the wanting comes back anew with a fresh target, and that a life that we find meaningful and interesting is far more attainable than one that is pleasant. Let me point you to a really interesting recently published scientific paper, Anon, finding that individuals who are high in self-control tend to prefer meaningful activities over pleasurable ones. This is from the journal Social, Psychological, and Personality Science, and the name of the article is High Self-Control Individuals Prefer Meaning Over Pleasure, written by Katarina Bernecker, Daniela Becker, Isti Goibite, and I think that's all of them. And it came out in March of this year. Psychologist Katarina Bernecker and her colleagues measured participants' tendency to engage in self-control, as well as their hedonic capacity. In other words, their ability to experience pleasure. As the design of this study implies, people vary in their ability to enjoy things. Some people just experience pleasure more readily and are more motivated by pleasure than others. This alone should lend you some comfort, I think. If you are not an especially pleasure-wired person, whether by trait or by trauma, you are far from alone. People high in hedonic capacity were people who tended to agree with the following statements. Note, some at the end of this list are reversed scored, and it should be pretty self-evident, but I'll read them out loud. I am good at pursuing my desires. I can follow my desires in the here and now. I often do what I feel like doing. In my spare time, I can relax well. In my spare time, I can switch off well. In my spare time, I find it difficult to turn off thoughts about what is still left to do. Thoughts about my work sometimes prevent me from enjoying pleasant activities and moments. Sometimes I cannot stop myself from thinking about things I still need to do. These are the reverse scored items. I often think about my duties even while I am enjoying a good moment. I often think after the fact that I should have enjoyed the moment more. And these are all from a scale called the Trait Hedonic Capacity Scale, which was developed by Bernecker and Becker, the two main authors of this piece, back in 2021. These high hedonic capacity pleasure seekers were compared with people high in self-control, who tend to agree with the following items, or to disagree with the reverse scored items, which have a minus sign next to them here. So this is the 13-item brief self-control scale, developed by Tagney, Baumeister, and Boone in 2004. June Tagney has written a lot about shame and published a lot about shame. So if you've read my work, you've seen citations from Tagney before. 1. I am good at resisting temptation. 2. I have a hard time breaking bad habits. 3. I am lazy. 4. I say inappropriate things. 5. I do certain things that are bad for me if they are fun. So you can see here that some of these have minuses next to them, which means that agreeing with these items means you are low on self-control, whereas agreeing with the items that have a plus next to them means that you are high in self-control. So that influences your score, and that is taken into account in how the researcher scores it. I refuse things that are bad for me. I wish I had more self-discipline. People would say that I have iron self-discipline. Pleasure and fun sometimes keep me from getting work done. I have trouble concentrating. I am able to work effectively toward long-term goals. Sometimes I can't stop myself from doing something, even if I know it is wrong. I often act without thinking through all the alternatives. So you can listen to those items as I was reading them and think about which ones feel true for you on both scales. And think for yourself, am I someone who can experience really intense pleasure and get in the moment? Am I a person with really high self-control? And it is possible to be both, but a lot of times they're inverted. But they're separate scales, so it is possible to be both. If you are a person who has mastered your autism traits for a long time, or otherwise carefully regulates how you present yourself and the choices you make about your behavior, then congratulations, you are probably a very high self-controlling individual. And if you find it very difficult to slow down in the moment or experience pleasure, you probably don't have a very large hedonic capacity. Now, as I said, it is possible for a person to have any combination of scores on these two measures, and for example, to be both high in self-control and high in pleasure-seeking. But for our purposes, I think it's safe to place you, Anon, as low hedonic capacity, high self-control. In a series of 3 studies, Bernecker and colleagues looked at how high self-control and high hedonic capacity individuals approached spending their free time. When given an hour to spend however they liked, participants who were high in hedonic capacity, in other words, the ability to enjoy pleasure, preferred to pursue activities that they ranked as highly pleasurable. These included baking, eating, napping, talking with a loved one, or taking a walk. Conversely, individuals who were high self-control were more likely to spend their time doing activities that they ranked as meaningful, such as reading, working, gardening, doing chores, or working out. It might sound pretty self-evident that the people who are interested in pleasure chose to spend their time on pleasure, and that people who exert a lot of restraint over themselves chose instead to take part in activities they find meaningful. But what's really interesting here, I think, is how much participants enjoyed the activities they selected and found them satisfying. It turns out that high self-controllers didn't just decide to spend their free time doing laundry or working because they felt they should do so. They also got more satisfaction from meaningful tasks, more than if they had chosen to spend their time on supposedly pleasurable activities. They were not motivated by the pursuit of straightforward pleasure. They ranked reading a book, knocking an item off the to-do list, or lifting some weights as more enriching, fulfilling, and motivating for them. And they cared more about these aspects of life than they did about pleasure. Individuals high in hedonic capacity, in contrast, preferred and were more satisfied with activities they said left them feeling soothed, amused, relaxed, indulged, and so on. This study points to the fact that happiness is not everything, and people actually differ quite dramatically in which ways of pursuing their time make their lives better. And that means there are no recommendations for leading a good life that are one size fits all. If you are someone high in self-control and low in hedonic capacity, you may have had the frustrating experience of trying to lay back and relax on your day off and being unable to quiet the whirring of your brain. You take a bath, but you can't keep your eyes off the soap scummy grout that needs to be scrubbed off. You share a languid restaurant meal with a best buddy, and through every course you can't help but think about the items on your to-do list, and you grow panicky and bored. Here's a link to a piece by me about being unable to experience pleasure and never being able to relax, called "You Might Not Recover from Burnout, Ever." Now, of course, an inability to enjoy activities can come from burnout, depression, or excessive pressure to be productive. But you also might feel frustrated when you seek pleasure because you are just not wired to enjoy pleasure right now, and would find it easier to let go and enjoy yourself if you had an interesting challenge to keep you busy instead. Many autistic people find working on a project related to their special interests to be a far better way of recharging their energy and lifting their mood than attempting to relax or have fun in neurotypical approved ways. You may find, Anon, that the same is true for you. In Bernecker and colleagues' paper, participants high in self-control tended to appreciate activities that they described with the following adjectives. Why don't you take a moment and listen to me reading this list, then ponder what life activities feel this way for you. So, what activities in your life feel meaningful, worthwhile, fulfilling, productive, important, purposeful, inspiring, elevating, motivating, or enriching? An interesting challenge of Autism Unmasking is figuring out what a worthwhile life even feels like for us, and abandoning the expectation that such a life will feel the way it does for non-autistics. Our best lives might not look happy, outgoing, energized, extroverted, or anything else that we have been taught it has to be. For years, I have been covertly masking to myself as a far more sociable person than I actually am. I still feel a deep shame about spending so much of my 20s nearly friendless, and fear returning to the suicidal depression of back when I had no support system. I spent years trying to prove that I can be an outgoing, likable, warm social organizer who throws wonderful parties and brings people together. And I have found that I can be. But this performance of having escaped my sad, old, autistic past comes at the expense of my peace far too often. I get tired and cranky from being so socially connected all of the time. I can listen well to other people for hours and leave them feeling really good, but it makes me feel more alone. What I really want to do is hole up in my room with lots of books and video games, crawling out of my den to only briefly interact as a nonverbal observer. It's deep thinking and intense sensations that helps me to check out from my worries and relax. Realizing that my most satisfied self is actually quite withdrawn, analytical, and not fun is one of the big challenges I face in my unmasking. It's still hard to explain to other people because I worry they will see me as cold, uncaring, unemotional, and not worth sticking around for. Thankfully, I am motivated by a good challenge. I like new experiences, developing new skills, figuring things out about myself, and upending people's expectations. And so I think I will make it through this and be okay. Not happy. I never really have been, but even more skillful, aware, and informed than I was before. So if you are having a hard time knowing what you want, Anon, I suggest you try focusing instead on what you find interesting. Be curious. Dive deep down an internet rabbit hole. Visit a library or a museum and get lost in your special interests. Organize information. Build new systems of understanding. Make a video essay on an extremely niche subject. Attend a conference on depictions of cognitive science in science fiction novels, as I once did with a classmate of mine. Try new things and see what you think of them. Test out a new hobby, learn a craft, an instrument, a language, volunteer for an organization that does work you admire, say yes when a friend invites you somewhere you never thought you'd like to go, like Grandpa's Cheese Barn or a rodeo. Do something new for the bit. Do it for the story. Excuse me. Do it knowing that you probably won't like it, but that you will learn something from it about yourself, the world, and the human condition. Visit new social spaces and study the people. Notice which populations of people you find admirable in some way. Do you like the brazen attitude of punks and goths? Find it impressive how devotedly the 80-year-old woman at your local park battles against the invasive soapwort plants? What can they teach you? What aspects of their life and personality can you borrow for your own? Be curious. What do you find remarkable in other people? What do you want to learn more about? What objects in your neighborhood do you not recognize? How can you figure out what they are and why they were built? How can you get nearer to people who make you feel engaged? What parts of history interest you? What areas of your community interest you? Are there any machines you want to understand the workings of? What do the people in your life find interesting or inspiring? Can you ask them about those things? Set goals that take you out of what's familiar. Give yourself a task to complete that gets you moving your body, interacting with new people, or exploring a new environment. Challenge yourself to visit every park in your city, let's say. Take a photo of every species of bird you see. Bake every item in Martha Stewart's Christmas cookie cookbook. Set up a freshwater aquarium. Get good enough at Magic the Gathering to compete in a local tournament. Or deadlift 100 pounds. Failure at this task, or failure to enjoy it, literally does not matter. You're giving yourself a watch list, but for experiences. So you can hit skip whenever you're not liking it. If it sucks, hit the bricks. Notice how you feel about all of this. What sounds viscerally unappealing to you? What spaces or activities make you feel ashamed? What activities surprised you? Why? Get curious about those feelings. It's okay if you don't like any of the new things you try or abandon them altogether. You are gathering data. Experimenting on yourself is valuable, even when an experience sucks. Acknowledging what you dislike is often the first step to recognizing what you do enjoy and what enjoyment means for you. Anon, I am anhedonic and cold and detached most days, and I doubt that I will ever be happy. In spite of all that I've done, sometimes I just really hate being conscious and being myself. But I am a curious person who lives to try new things and understand more about the human condition and to make something of that understanding, including pieces of writing, and that saves me. You can find more about yourself through what fascinates, perplexes, frustrates, compels, shames, infuriates, and motivates you. Anything that provokes a real reaction in you is worth paying some attention to, I think. When people write into this column wanting to change their lives around, I often encourage them to both have fun and to find something about the experience interesting. I believe that in the end, our ability to be interested and learn is the one thing we always have. Our wonderfully hyperactive, critical minds are always there for us, even in times of loss and unthinkable pain. We are the universe witnessing itself. We are animals fighting messily to survive, using a whole host of contradictory and unpleasant instincts. But we are able to tell ourselves stories about it. So make the story of your life one you want to read. It might not have a happy ending, but you can give it a hell of a plot. And the closing image for this piece is a shot I took over the river in Chicago. You can see the kind of maroon painted railing. I'm shooting down into the dark, murky waters in the winter where shards of ice have been broken apart. Like taking off the layers of shame and seeing the guts underneath. It's messy, but it's beautiful. Beauty in a season of coldness and discomfort is what I wrote there as a caption for the image. So there we have it. That's the piece. That's the very long-winded piece on exploring, figuring out what you're about, and collecting data at every stage of the journey, even when life really is absolutely terrible. That's one thing that has definitely stayed with me throughout life, that when I'm going through something, whether it's like years ago, like domestic violence or a sexual trauma, or when I was going through a really serious medical issue earlier this year, it didn't get under my skin the way that I see it getting under the skin of a lot of people around me, because the whole time I was thinking, well, isn't this interesting? I'm learning a lot about, in this case, how the medical system works. I'm meeting a lot of new people on my care team. I'm trying out new medications and seeing how they feel in my body. I'm learning how the hand even works. This was a hand injury that I had. And that really helped me keep it together and keep it going, because I'm sensitive. I know if you're here, you're probably sensitive. You're probably somebody who wants to crumple into nothing when something rough happens, and I am too. But what I have found is that if the shit that's happening is interesting, that's a saving grace. So let go of the need of happiness. Accept maybe that you'll never experience like endless pleasure. And maybe you'll learn some things that were worth learning. And maybe that'll help you connect with other people anyway, because then you know more about what life on this planet is like. So thank you everyone for watching and listening to this. I'm again still really enjoying these. Let me know what you'd like to see in future essays or on this channel. Thanks for everyone who has been leaving comments. Slowly and steadily, the channel is getting more views, and it's getting pushed out into more people's feeds who aren't already following me, which is really nice. I'm really thankful for the people who see these thumbnails and are like, what the hell is this? And then they stick around, like new discoverers of this work. It's welcome to the party. Nice to meet you. It's great to see you. Thanks for taking a chance on me. And yeah, without further ado, I'll leave you here, and I'll be back with another essay and another video version of it real soon. All right, thanks. Bye.